Todd Grantham was supposed to bring an SEC-style defense to Stillwater, America. Doug Meacham and Chad Weiberg say, bye, Felicia. You were supposed to bring an SEC-D. You did not, so we will SEC you later.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Alldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet's a winner, you'll get $300 back in bonus bets to use all across the app. Download the app today so you can get squared away with FanDuel on this season. We get to roll right into the conversation that's naturally grabbing some of the headlines today. Todd Grantham, Oklahoma State's defensive coordinator, was fired as of yesterday. I was excited. I think a lot of us were excited about the prospect of paying somebody $1.3, $1.4 million to be our highest paid coordinator, to bring all of these SEC coaches with him and to bring this SEC flavored defense and players essentially with him as well, was something that we were all going to be excited about. Were we going to be as good as 21D? Probably not, but could we at least be more exciting and have a lot more blitz packages? That was the common consensus, and unfortunately that has not happened. On average, we're giving up almost 35 points a game this season. We're giving up over 463 yards a game this season. We just gave up darn near 600 yards to Baylor, including 393 passing by Sawyer Robertson. It was an absolute disaster. We had players in the wrong spots. We had players that looked like they had no clue coverage-wise where they were supposed to be. It almost looks like the plan got changed a little bit right before the game, and it threw everything through a loop that we cannot afford at this point in time. But obviously we can't afford to get rid of these dudes. So the next time somebody says Oklahoma State doesn't have enough money to be competitive, we've been talking on the show about how, by my math, from what I'm aware of, the roster was around 11, 13-ish mil, possibly even up to 15 mil. Gundy says we spent 7. Then it comes out recently that we did spend upwards of 15. Money is not a problem. We had the money to afford Mike Gundy's buyout. We clearly have the money to pay Todd Grantham essentially $4 million worth over 3 years to now get the flip out of here. We're going to have to continuously get rid of some of these coaches, which come with a lot of 2 to 3, 4-year style contracts. And that is not something that we're battling. I'm happy to see that Doug Meacham, and even surely Rob Glass is involved, and Chad Weiberg's definitely got to be involved with decisions that come up to this level. But I'm happy to see that Doug Meacham is on a mission. He's on a mission to prove that he deserves to have a spot, whether it's him as the head coach or him as the offensive coordinator of the new staff. Doug Meacham is on a mission to get rid of the problems and to insert enough positivity in that locker room, in that culture, to give Oklahoma State a chance to be a fighting football team. And offensively, we finally saw the creativity, right? We finally saw what we hoped we would see, whether it's a little bit of that mixture of the 2011 Cowboy offense, the 2013-14 Trayvon Boykin style offenses. It's very evident that Mike Gundy, unfortunately, was probably, having some constraints. We already covered that in the live show. But now Todd Grantham is no longer the man, and Clint Bowen has been elevated to the interim defensive coordinator title. And, of course, Greg Brown, the safeties coach, one of the only coaches other than Sean McGuire that was retained from the previous staff and upgraded from a GA to a safeties coach. He's out as well. That one does make kind of sense, right? Because if Mike Gundy was elevating Sean Snyder and elevating Greg Brown, and Gundy's no longer there, of course, that makes some sense. That also makes some sense as to why you've seen a safety commit dude like Jabari Thornton getting in the portal already. You've already seen Dylan Smith getting in the transfer portal. So there is some correlation and causation there. Now, there hasn't been a ton of portal stuff, which we're about to get to here in a little bit. But realistically, Todd Grantham was potentially recommended by Nick Saban. I don't always necessarily buy into certain coincidences, but I do find it kind of ironic that Mike Gundy mentioned that he did reach out to Nick Saban and he did talk to Saban in the offseason, and Nick Saban told him, in order for you to get this thing back on track, in my opinion, you're going to have a head coach of the defense. So you're going to have to pay somebody to be a head coach of a defense and let him hire his staff and recruit his way and do it his way, which sounded like a phenomenal ordeal for Oklahoma State. It sounded like it was going to allow Mike Gundy to take more of a CEO role. And we did hire Todd Grantham, and we paid him a legitimate amount of money to come in, bring his guys, bring in a new wave of transfers, and do things his way. But unfortunately, it didn't work out, which is surprising because, again, Mike Gundy says that Nick Saban told him, you need to hire a head coach of the defense. And then a mere matter of weeks later, we're hiring Todd Grantham, who recently was a defensive line coach for Nick Saban at Alabama. So it almost feels like Mike Gundy believed that Todd Grantham was probably going to be the right guy to completely rebuild this defense, to make this defense so tough and physically violent and imposing and a nightmare for teams to play. He was supposed to bring that attitude alongside the play calling acumen that he's probably developed. Guys, Todd Grantham has coached under some of the greatest defensive minds in college football, right? He got to coach with or under Kirby Smart, with Dan Lanning. He got to coach under Nick Saban. He got to coach with and under Dan Mullen at multiple stops. Yes, Florida fans did try to tell us that Todd Grantham was a terrible hire, but there was schools or fans from other SEC schools like Mississippi State, Georgia, Bama saying that he's probably going to be a decent hire. So shout out to Florida fans for calling it, all right? Some Florida fans were in my comments this section in the offseason, like, you're all excited about Todd Grantham and all of this SEC stuff, but he was a disaster at Florida. Now we're finding out why. So, yeah, the intensity level ticked up. We were supposedly more violent, but we obviously didn't have a ton of buy-in. Because when the season started and we got to go 11-11 against other dudes, we started seeing that we have deficiencies. And sometimes it was not in the personnel or in the talent. It was in the who's starting or limitations on the play calling, right? Defensively, you could see multiple times where Brian McCoy was making crazy plays happen, but it looked like he had to do some extra stuff to get there. Maybe it was play call, right? Maybe it was called and designed to go through another gap that he knew wasn't going to work, wasn't going to make sense. And then, at the end of the day, you look at all of the changes that have been made, the fact that both Doug Meacham, Chad Weiberg, and probably even Rob Glass sprinkled in this, was willing to eat this money for Mike Gundy, eat this money for Todd Grantham, to eat this money for Greg Brown. And naturally, we're probably going to have to eat a little bit more money because that transfer portal window is open. And it's been pretty quiet for Oklahoma State, which is a little bit surprising, but also it makes some sense. Sometimes the political landscape inside of a locker room on behalf of the coaches can be beneficial. It can be positive. It can go negative where you have a bunch of players playing guys that don't deserve to play. It can happen. We've seen it happen, but it can also go the other way. So you can have a competent product that gives you the ability to sales pitch your way into maintaining this roster. We're going to have the energy this season to power through. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What you're going to love the most is how portable they are. They have big taste and a tiny shot that you can take anywhere with you and get the boost that you need when you need it. If you've been eyeing the specific flavor of a lifetime, or you just want to keep it fresh every time you go in and get a new flavor, that's what 5-hour energy gives you. Plus, they give you some of the old school traditionals as well. You're going to love how fast that 5-hour energy kicks in and the fact that it's sugar-free, so you don't have the crazy crashing out later. So have enough with the boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get to the favorites that you love the most, or be bold and try something new with all of the new amazing flavors in-store or online at www.5hourenergy.com. Make sure you go there today or head on over to Amazon as well to get the energy boost that you need to power through the season. All right, so traditionally, when something like this happens, I think you can look, again, we keep reverting back to UCLA, but it's a very good example. As soon as Foster was let go, you saw a considerable number of players, primarily recruits in the beginning, that were entering this portal window. You're seeing some kind of matriculate out now a little bit more out of Los Angeles, but you're not seeing a lot of that at Oklahoma State. Yeah, Dylan Smith did go in. Shea Frybaum did go in. And naturally, we're going to have a handful of other players that we should hear about here in the next week or so. And here's the deal. Some of these players, not all of them, but some of them probably were some of the ones that didn't buy into the Cowboy culture, that were getting the NIL and maybe were less focused on representing Oklahoma State and having a brotherhood and fighting on behalf of something other than financial gains. But you're not seeing some of the players that we know, had family and individualistically were not excited about the way the Gundy thing went down. And you're going to have some that are Gundy loyalists that likely enter the portal, but some of those have not entered the portal yet. So naturally, that means that Doug Meacham, Chad Weiberg, Kenyatta Wright, a decent number of individuals are using this opportunity to sales pitch something of substance. Because before the Baylor game, there wasn't a lot to sales pitch. But after the Baylor game, at least Doug Meacham can go to the offensive players and say, listen, guys, I know we didn't beat Baylor. I know it's been, difficult this season to have some positivity, but look what we did against Baylor offensively. And we got rid of Todd Grantham, right? Because defensively, that is not up to standard. So now you have something to sales pitch. Now you can go to the players that were potentially just playing their hearts out against Baylor to put a little bit more on film. Maybe some of those dudes are the ones being sales pitched by Doug Meacham and Clint Bowen and Kenyatta Wright, Chad Weiberg, whomever else, that, yeah, it might feel like you need to go into the portal, but give me a little bit of time. If I'm Doug Meacham, that's what I'm telling the offensive players that aren't exactly happy with the way things transpired. It's the same conversation I'm having with some of the dudes that feel like that there's guys in the locker room bragging about NIL that don't provide anything and they don't participate and they don't pay attention in meetings and they still get rewarded with playing time. If you're honest with those dudes and you're honest with the team and you're honest with the offensive players as a Meacham, it's like, God, we have something here. Like if Baylor would have been 45-0, 45-3, then yes, I could completely understand a large contingent of players wanting to maintain the redshirt status and wanting to put themselves in a position to not lose any eligibility and go elsewhere. But that's not what happened. What happened was we put on a legitimate offensive performance and looked like a adequate Power 4 football team on the offensive side of the ball. So any of the players that were contemplating jumping in after the Baylor game, at least they have something to chew on now. At least Doug Meacham has something to sales pitch. And on the defensive side of the ball, you could make the argument that the sales pitch is going to be, listen, we had faith in Todd Grantham. We have faith in the fact that he brought all of these SEC coaches with him, but we're willing to shake things up because what just happened is not acceptable. What has happened throughout the course of the season is not acceptable. So if you're entertaining the portal, give us a couple more weeks. That's probably the sales pitch. And it sounds like if that is the case, it's kind of working. And it makes sense that it would work because you can look at the Baylor film and say, as an offensive player, you know what? Maybe I should give this a couple more weeks. Because if it keeps looking like that, then this perhaps is the Oklahoma State brand of offense that I signed up for. This is why I came to be a wide receiver in Stillwater. This is why I came to be a running back in RBU America. It's because I want to be part of an offense that is somewhat creative and innovative and uses spacing to get guys with the most versatility and athleticism in open space. Clearly, that's not what we've been doing throughout the course of the season. So it's natural for some of these players to say, you know what? I've busted my tail. I've done all the workouts. I've done all the film. I've done all the playbook. I'm never late. and I'm still getting the same NIL, and I'm still not getting any opportunities. And the guys making $20,000 a month are goofing off, messing around in the locker room, joking about their NIL, joking about what they're buying, and then they half-ass it at practice and half-ass it in the meetings. This is a good opportunity for Doug Meacham and whomever else to sales pitch those guys that, listen, we're doing something to fix this. We look legitimate on offense, at least legitimate enough to buy a couple more weeks. Defensively, Todd Grantham wasn't cutting it. You know what we did? We got rid of him because that is not the standard here at Oklahoma State. So if you're a Jacoby Oliphant or a LaDainian Fields or a Rodney Fields, you're probably hearing, give me more time. I understand you being reluctant to stay. I understand you being frustrated, and whether it be NIL or playing time or, the equality of performance-based incentives inside the locker room, you can, as a coach, admit that maybe you could see it as an athlete how things look on the exterior. But now we have something to sales pitch. Offensively, that is worth sticking around for. Defensively, do we know what it's going to look like without Todd Grantham and without Greg Brown? No, we don't. But again, the sales pitch probably is give Clint Bowen at least a couple weeks, right? You have a 30-day window here. Give us 20 days. Give us 25 days. And if it still doesn't look different enough for you to be excited, then by all means, you could potentially explore the red shirt or transfer. Matter of fact, when it comes to the red shirt, I think there's probably some guys that we need to have real heart-to-hearts with. I think nobody would argue that keeping Haas Haney in the next season would be absolutely massive for Oklahoma State. And obviously, Brian McCoy went out for the latter half of the Baylor game. If Brian McCoy has a little bit of injury, can we not just call a spade a spade? Can somebody just not, holler at Kenyatta and say, listen, I guess someone looked pretty good. Gunnar Wilson finally got in and got to make some plays out on special teams. He was responsible in his lane discipline and things of that nature. So if Brian McCoy has a little bit of an injury, if Brian McCoy's been battling something, would it not be in the best interest of Oklahoma State if Brian McCoy is a hardcore, loyal and true, bleeding orange kind of guy, which from what I gather, he 100% is? I mean, could we not at least sales pitch guys like Haas Haney and Brian McCoy that if you have some injuries that are potentially going to linger, well, why don't you just keep your red shirt this season? And why don't you be the foundational pieces, or at least part of the building blocks for this next round of Cowboy culture that needs to be in the locker room? You saw more dudes get more playing time, which we're about to get into. But the political side of the coaching oftentimes is not positive. Typically, the political sales pitching side is, I'm going to make sure that my guys play that I brought here, that I got big-time NIL contracts, because if they don't perform, then I look like I chose the wrong dudes. I look like I got people NIL money that didn't deserve it. And that appears to be something that is at least beginning to change. I don't think anyone can make the argument that what we saw this previous weekend was, for the first time this season, highly encouraging, or at least somewhat encouraging. And it seems right now that you're not seeing a mass exodus per se of players into the portal, because I would imagine that Meacham and Clint Bowen and some of these coaches that we need to retain, potentially like a Corey Patterson or a Jules Montanar, I would assume that these dudes also see some of the same things. And I would assume some of these dudes are, in fact, making that sales pitch of, listen, it hasn't been good. It hasn't been great. We probably did pay the wrong players to come in. We probably didn't emphasize Cowboy culture enough. We probably allowed some coaches to get too far away from Cowboy culture, which is precisely why we've got possible internal fighting in the locker room. And it's not over. Some players getting paid, some players not getting paid. It's about the fact that it's supposed to be merit-based. So if you're getting the upper tier of NIL money, but you haven't been accountable, and you haven't been on time, and you haven't been busting your hump, you should not be still getting the upper echelon. But a Parker Robertson style dude that is never late, that does everything right, that busts his hump 24/7, no matter what's happening, he should probably get bumps, right? If it's supposed to be merit based, hopefully that's part of this new political pitch. Is the politics of everything is new, so you need to stick around to see what it's going to become before you make a decision. It's a good thing. So the sales pitching of the political, we need to bring back some of the cowboy culture, old school bleeding orange style of I don't know, merit based stuff in the locker room. If that happens, then I think we should all be pretty happy about what we can look forward for the rest of the season. Because at the end of the day, that's all it's supposed to be about, right? You're supposed to have to earn it. And if we're seeing more and more players that seemingly are doing more earning than getting, that's how Oklahoma State can turn this thing into a successful, at least somewhat successful season. Ladies and gentlemen, QO is who we need to talk about right now. QO is, well, it's one of the tools that's going to help make a huge difference for business owners if you're utilizing something like QO, formerly known as Open Phone. So we've talked about it on this program before. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed phone call is money left on the table for a business. So when every customer conversation is going to count, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7, no matter what's happening. QO is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or a computer, so there's no more carrying multiple phones around or having to readily depend on a landline. You're going to love QO, formerly known as Open Phone, because it lets your team share one number and collaborate on calls and texts like shared inbox, with so no customers get left out hanging. Their built-in AI agent is an absolute game changer. It can answer after-hours calls, capture leads, and keep business moving forward even when you're off the clock. So whether you're a solo operator juggling everything or part of a much larger team, QO makes it easy for you to stay responsive and professional. See why over 90,000 businesses trust QO, formerly known as Open Phone. Make sure that you get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at QO.com/LockedOnCollege. That is QUO.com/LockedOnCollege. If you've got an existing number with another service, QO will port them over at no extra charge. QO, where you have no missed calls, meaning you have no missed customers, so you're not going to miss out on your capitalization for your business with QO. We also got to make sure that we're capitalizing in the betting department, which is always and forever going to be FanDuel. The NFL season is here to save all of us, and FanDuel has an offer that you're not going to want to miss out on. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 back in bonus bets if you win. So all you got to do is pick a bet, put down $5. If the bet hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. You're going to love using FanDuel because it gives you so many ways to play the game and be involved to an unprecedented level. Whether you're going to build parlays, you're going to have same-game player props, or follow the live lines during the game, it makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little extra skin in the game. So, what are you waiting for? Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. That is FanDuel.com. Go there today, download the app, and get squared away for that $300 back in bonus bets if your first $5 hauler is a winner at FanDuel. All right, we will kind of cruise through this one here because we have a couple more episodes to get to. Hopefully, we'll get another 2 more in today, at least 1 more for sure. But lastly, it's very evident that between the moves on the roster and the firing of Todd Grantham and the willingness to allow Greg Brown to leave, and even some of the transfer portals, like I said, we've already had a couple safeties, that seems to be the right recipe. And typically when an interim coach comes in, he doesn't have a lot of leeway to start firing people, especially the defensive coordinator, who is the highest paid dude on the entire staff. And then you bring in Clint Bowen to be the replacement. And Clint Bowen is a very, very good replacement. He's been a safeties coach, linebackers coach. He's been defensive coordinator at North Texas. He's been a defensive coordinator at Kansas University. He's been a linebacker coach, safety coach all over the country. He's been an interim head coach that took over for KU. He stayed on staff there. He was a GA here. He helps bring his son over from Tulsa. Hopefully, Banks Bowen is somebody that gets in the mix at some point in time for this season. However, if you look at this previous game, we have some fun at quarterback, which we're going to talk about next episode. But yeah, we saw Armstrong Nodum. We saw a lot more Landon Dean. We saw a full serving of Aiden Kelly. We saw more David Kabongo, especially in the second half. Landon Cleveland, if he's bought in and he's 100% behind, right, Zane and whatever we're doing in the offensive system, I think Landon Cleveland is somebody who could change the direction of a program. Having him in there, pretty important. Cam Smith had a heck of a day. Dylan Smith actually had a pretty decent day. Good for him to put something on film. But, it opens doors again. Parker Robertson, we've talked about guys like him ad nauseum. Whenever he leaves the game with 15 pounds of ice all over him, and he's sore, banged up, hurting, but no matter what's happening around him, no matter what he's making in NIL, Parker Robertson's going to do everything physically possible to make sure that he's ready to rock and roll, throw pads on, and fire away on Tuesday. And you're seeing more of those guys played against Baylor. And did we look great defensively? No. But we're about to find out if the argument can now be made that it wasn't the people on the field, it was the scheme. It was the fact that we tried to do too much. We tried to change too much. We tried to install things too late. So instead of just playing free, you're playing guys that maybe are not as talented as the original group of starters, but they're more bought in. They bleed more orange. They care more about Oklahoma State. And schematically, perhaps if they were put in a better position, we see a different defense too, because the effort was definitely different. The buy-in seemed different. The tenacity level up front seemed different. So it appears as though we're starting to reward dudes. And then when Brian did get a boo-boo, I guess someone comes in and plays really flipping good. And it's opened the door. Trip White started over Brandon Rawls. I think Brandon Rawls is a great story. And I think Brandon Rawls could be a very valuable member of the team. But Trip White was having a blast out there. Trip White was running around, making plays, getting in the backfield, jumping to ruin the window for the quarterback. The effort was better. The Cowboy Culture stuff, it still exists. And it seemed as though the Baylor game, there was an emphasis on playing more of those dudes, more of the Landon Deans and the Armstrong Nodums and the Aiden Kellys and the Parker Robertsons and the Gunnar Wilsons and the David Kabongos. We saw tons more of that this game. And it was a much better product. So just like Doug Meacham was able to kind of show that offensively, we have some ability. We have some creativity. We have packaging that we haven't been able to utilize enough. Now that Todd Grantham's gone and, Greg Brown went as well, does Clint Bowen open this thing up? Clint Bowen seems to be a players coach. The players like him. There had to be a somewhat consensus on him elevating, because typically you upgrade like a D-line coach or a linebacker coach. You don't oftentimes get a GA, or not a GA, but an analyst to swap over into the headset role. But I think it's a brilliant move. Clint Bowen is one of those kind of dudes that you need for the culture. So I love the move. Hopefully we see more roster shakeups, because the guys who care more visibly play better. Maybe they're not as fast. Maybe they're not as strong. But it's a better product. And that's how we rebuild where we're at. So I think we're rebuilding the right way. All right, y'all. So we're going to have this one. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in. Like it, share it, subscribe it. My podcast people, you're everything that makes it work. Do what you do.